Evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the invite for this evening. It's much appreciated. It's quite different for presentations I've done in the past, so it's great to link in with a new community and a broader community. So much appreciated for the invite. So thank you, and thanks for the Zoom support that has been undertaken today to help me to do this. So that's great. Thank you. So yeah. So we'll just start the slide. So just very briefly about myself, just to put me into a bit of context. So I've worked with NHS 24 for nearly 20 years now in various roles, but as head of digital for the last 18 months. And looking at NHS 24 and how, you know, I've been asked to speak today about digital transformation in a crisis, and we've been through a few at NHS 24, but from a pandemic perspective, this is really only the second pandemic we've had to deal with after the flu pandemic back in 2009. And obviously from a digital perspective, we're in a very different place now to where we were then. So it's really interesting to look at that as in our response and the role that digital has played in that, and our ability to scale up quickly has been a key part of that. So I'll take you through a few slides, a little bit about the organisation, but also just mainly around what we've done over the last 6 weeks, which is unbelievable. It's only 6 weeks. It feels like a lot longer. So next slide, please. So just for those that aren't aware, so NHS 24 is a special health or a national health board, covers the whole of Scotland. We're Scotland's digital health and care service, providing public-facing information, advice and services to promote health and well-being and support people to access the right services for them when they need it. We operate 24/7, 365 days a year, serving the whole of the population of Scotland and sponsored by Scottish Government. Next slide, please. Yep. So we have a national call centre model covering the whole of the country. We have about 8 sites. We have a range of services across health and care. The one that you'll probably know more about is the 111 service, but we also have a range of other services through Breathing Space, which is a mental health service, and health and care information services as well, delivered across a range of channels. Mainly telephone, but we also have web chat, SMS and our online services. As you can see, our call centres manage about 1.5 million calls per annum. That's pretty static over the last few years. Our online services have rapidly developed since 2016, and we're now dealing, or we manage around 4 to 5 million contacts per month through our online services, mainly through our nhsinform.scot website. That's our main mode of dealing with those contacts. So next slide, please. Yeah, so basically our main customer base is everyone. We're not able to really differentiate, which is great in some ways, but also very challenging in other ways, to make sure that you are able and enable access to services for everybody in the country. We use sort of Scottish approach to service design, which is very much looking at user need, basing it on that. This is a newer way that we've been working over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years. So it's still quite early doors getting that embedded within the organisation. Looking at really exploring user needs across all range of channels and trying to develop for the 20% and not the 80%. Historically, we've always aimed at the masses, but actually trying to do that for the 20%, and then by default the 80% generally can get access. So that's kind of a bit of background about us. Plus I just wanted to put a nice picture up of Buchanan Street back in busier times. Not like that these days. So next slide, please. So this is really looking at our sort of immediate response to COVID. So the outbreak started really affecting the UK sort of late January of this year, at very low levels, but then began to obviously rapidly increase throughout February, and then coming into March, the response really kicked in and obviously then went into lockdown later in March, which obviously had a huge number of impacts for everyone. So these are the sort of main areas that I feel we've either responded to or have managed to deal with the approach that we've taken to our response. So demand management, that's obviously the key focus from a digital perspective, particularly looking at how we can manage, particularly through the initial peak where volumes were just such that we would never have been able to physically scale up our contact centres enough to deal with that volume. So how do we use the assets that we've already got? Looking at NHS Inform, looking at other assets that we had available, digital assets we had available to us, which obviously can scale up really quickly and to peaks that our telephone capacity could never deal with. But also what other resources would we be able to develop to be able to manage that demand in a way that will try and take away the demand that doesn't need to speak to somebody. You try and filter that demand, and that's the main focus at the moment, or certainly in this immediate phase. That was the main focus of the digital activity. So looking at demand, looking at what we're already doing from a digital perspective as well. So what areas do we want to accelerate and actually push forward? For example, we already had a project looking to deliver GP practice websites to practices in Scotland that don't have a website at the moment. So that was sponsored through Scottish Government again. So that was an accelerated project rather than being one that was maybe put on ice for just now while we focused on COVID, because that was viewed as a way that we could support primary care to actually manage the volumes they were dealing with. So that was the demand management, obviously was the key focus, looking at what services we could maintain, what services needed to close down, and focus resources, as in human resources, on the ones that were really key. Collaboration, that was really a phenomenal part, and that has led partly to tonight with the collaboration with XDesign, who really stepped up and offered their support to the NHS to develop an app, as it turned out to be, with us. So that's been a phenomenal, and that's one of a number of offers and fabulous collaborations that have happened both internally within the NHS, which sounds a bit strange, but we're one organisation, but we're multiple bodies within that, all with our own budgets, priorities, etc. So in normal world, sometimes it's difficult to access some of those resources and work together in a way that we would like. One thing that's come out so strongly from this is having one key focus and one objective really enables people to step up, and it removes a lot of the boundaries that really weren't there before. So that's been phenomenal. So we've had a lot of new partners that have come on board, suppliers that have really stepped up and offered additional services, helped us prioritise work to make sure we were focusing on really key demand and needs, and also our colleagues who have really collaborated internally across different directorates and really just said, right, what can I do to help you? It's amazing the number of phone calls I received in sort of early March, and it was really people just phoning and saying, what can we do to help? That was literally all they were saying. They're like, we're here for you, what can we do to help you? So that was great. Sometimes that in itself was a demand that we had to then try and manage, but it was phenomenal, and being able to access work with people, it probably would have been maybe more difficult for us to do in the past, just with some constraints around, different procurement routes and things like that. These were, certainly there was some different views on that going forward, just to enable work to be done to help this work progress. Flexibility, just reflecting back on the collaboration, people were so flexible in their approach to doing things. One example is Teams, which the whole of the NHS really didn't have access to. There's sort of a rollout of Office 365 happening. With this, Teams got rolled out within 2 weeks following lockdown, so which is just phenomenal from an NHS perspective. So we now are able to, so my whole team's been working from home for 6 weeks now nearly, so we've been able to work really well collaboratively using these tools, which we just didn't have easy access to before. So that's been great. Following a swift initial affair with Zoom, which we had to move off quite quickly, but we're now fully embedded in Teams, and it's really supported how we move forward. The pace of change was just something I've never experienced before. It was absolutely phenomenal, and just as an organisation or as a digital team, and this is not just the digital team that's delivered this, this is working in partnership with suppliers and other parts of the NHS, but just in the last 6 weeks alone, we've developed and deployed 2 chatbots, a new app with XDesign, 4 new online guides with multiple versions, a whole hub of online content with translations and AV content, all of which is now reaching around version 50 to 60, something like that. 2 new SMS services, a new web chat channel, plus 15 GP practice websites, all while the team was working in isolation and over the last 6 weeks. That kind of deployment we would never ever have been able to do in normal business. So it's absolutely fundamentally changed and demonstrated what we can do when we can really put our minds to it and really show what we can do if we're all pointing in the same direction. So I think that's a huge learning point that's going to come out of this for the whole system from a health and care system perspective. And the last piece in this is really around governance. So as an NHS, as all organisations, but I'm sure you'll appreciate from an NHS medical clinical perspective, it's a huge focus on governance, also from a technical security perspective and financial perspective. So we usually, there's significant processes we have to go through for each of those elements to really understand how we move forward, which can be long and frustrating at times when we're wanting to develop fast. So actually what has happened has been amazing in that these areas have really come up with pragmatic approaches to dealing with this. So it's giving enough governance to move forward and to allow us to deploy, but has not held up the pace of development, which has been absolutely brilliant. And I'm really hoping that that's something that we can look at going forward. The risk profile in this, when you're in a pandemic, the risk profile is different. So that enables us for certain elements, obviously the safety and the clinical governance piece isn't anything that we can really drop, but the approach that people take to that is different in enabling us to move that forward. So the risk profile does change, which does drop the gates a little bit and enable you to move forward in different ways. And we're now in a bit of a, we're past that immediate phase, we're now in a little bit of a lull, so we're able to consolidate a lot of that governance now, do a little bit more of the paperwork which we maybe did in a light way in the initial stages, but we're now able to develop that a bit more just to make sure that we've got that governance in place going forward. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of a visual of some of the products that we've deployed. The lovely XDesign app is on the bottom right hand corner there. We've also got the GP website just to the left of that. The self-help guides in the bottom left hand corner as well. That's just the output of it. It was quite difficult to show that in a static picture. Some of the SMS traffic that's gone out top left, so that's, we've been able to generate that to anyone who's contacted the 111 service using a mobile. So again, that was through our information governance changes and a pragmatic approach to that. We were able to push out links to our content through that route to make sure that people were getting the right information. The public health message and the public health need outweighed some of the information governance questions that maybe would have been raised as part of that normally. Excuse me, the top middle one is our COVID hub that's on the NHS Inform website. And then on the right hand side of that is the chatbot that we've developed with a company called Amido. Again, they offered their services and offered this tool to us for a period of time. So this just enables people to ask questions of that content. And we're enabling that through different channels now, looking at Facebook Messenger and things. So again, things that would have taken a long time to get to this point, we've run them all up in 6 weeks, which has been great. It certainly helps as well, visibility of our assets when we've got the First Minister, we've got the URL splattered across the First Minister's lectern twice a day. So that really does focus the mind and making sure that what we've got up there is right and safe and of a good quality for the public to access. Next slide, please. So the next phase really is what we're entering into now, is beginning to look at the medium term. We've passed that initial peak and we're now consolidating, looking at what next. So we're fully anticipating another peak. What that looks like, I don't know, but really focusing from the digital perspective, it's now we've got the opportunity to plan for that peak. So we've got all these new assets, which we didn't have in February, when we knew that first peak, or when that first peak hit us. So we've now got that. So it's around how do we focus on making sure and consolidating those assets so that we can plan and make sure that they are used to the best ability for the next peak, so that it can manage as much of that volume as we can. The focus is certainly changing on that initial hit to now the longer term impacts of COVID. So moving from that maybe initial symptom focus to now looking at, testing, looking at longer term impacts on immunisation programmes, etc., all of which have an impact on us from a broader service perspective. So we're now focusing on that. The tail of this pandemic will be long, particularly in the health and care systems, but also right across society and the economy. So we're all going to change, how we work, how that feels going forward. But I hope for the better in a lot of ways, particularly from our perspective, from that digital perspective. The value of what we've done is beginning to be seen. So I think that's really important. And I see the next big sort of piece for us is around testing and how we're able to support that when the volume of testing increases, and that's opened up to broader groups, rather than at the minute it's quite controlled who gets access to that. So I think as that's beginning to open up, we've definitely got a role to play within that from a digital perspective, potentially through our app that we're with XDesign as well, so that we can support people to access that testing appropriately. Next slide, please. And yeah, so this is really around that longer term. So just building on that last piece. That's a nice picture from the top of Ben Nevis from a couple of years ago. But looking at that, the sun rising over, the new normal. What does it look like now for us from a digital perspective? I think the goalposts have changed from an NHS perspective. What we've wanted to do and we've been trying to do for a number of months, we've just delivered in 6 weeks. So my hope is that is recognised and sustained, and that the fundamental change that we've had, we've delivered transformation in 6 weeks. There's work to do. It's not perfect. There's a lot more joining up we can do of those assets, but I think that is certainly a change. New relationships have formed with partners and with the public, and making sure that what we've done is sustained and embedded that transformation going forward. It's affecting our strategy, organisationally. What we're going to look like in 12 to 18 months' time is very different from where we thought we were going to be. So it's really impactful across the whole of the organisation. So yeah, and that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Louise. That's fascinating. We've got a number of questions here. If you have another question yourself, please type it into the chat, which is down at the bottom of the screen. If you just click on that, you can then type it in. So Ian Baxter would like to know, could you expand on what you mean by going for the 20%? Who is that? How do you decide who that is?
So this is very much speaking from our perspective. So looking at, so traditionally our services within NHS 24 have been fully telephone based. So the only way you can contact the 111 service at the moment is via telephone. So that covers 80% of people can manage through the telephone, no problem at all. But there's 20% of the population that is an immediate barrier. So for example, historically people that have used BSL, British Sign Language, find that extremely difficult to use the telephone. There's now Contact Scotland, which enables that service, but also anyone with hearing difficulties, so you maybe not deaf, but you have hearing difficulties where English is not your first language. Communication over the phone is challenging for people. So if we can enable our services for those people who find that really difficult, then that will provide channels for everyone else to access as well. It's not to say we're going to get rid of the telephone. That's an option, but it's giving people choice and giving people options of different ways that they can engage with the service. And I feel digital has a significant role to play with that through the use of text-based services, web chat, SMS, other elements that we can play to support that, but it has to be fully aligned with that clinical model that we have in place through the telephone service. So I hope that helps.
That's fascinating. So it's the idea of it's kind of like a trickle up rather than a trickle down, you know?
Yes, yeah. So historically, we've always designed for the 80% and then just tried to see what we can do for the rest to see, oh, can we, you know, what else could we do to maybe make that easier? Whereas actually, if you focus on the 20%, then the 80% are able to follow. So there was a good wee cartoon, I should have included it in my presentation actually, which really sums it up nicely around accessing a building, a young person in a wheelchair. It's a school, so young person in a wheelchair, and the janitor's clearing snow off the building, and there's a ramp on one side, and then there's 3 steps on the other side, and he's clearing the steps of snow, and he's like, well, why don't you clear the ramp? The guy's like, well, most people are going up the steps. He says, yeah, but if you clear the ramp, I'll get up, plus everyone else will be able to get up too. So it's around that. So that you know, it's very simple, but it's hard to do. It's really difficult to do, but it's around focusing on the 20%. So that's our aim anyway, to try and do that.
Fantastic. We've got a great question from Hilda Friedness, who's with Malsey, and she wants to know about, you know, this is you know, what we're experiencing as a society. It's international. So how do you take learnings from other countries, from other national health services, and to what extent has that informed your approach? To what extent are you sharing best practice with them?
No, absolutely, and it is very much an international response, and it's so new to everyone that everyone's sort of trying new things. And it's kind of happening almost at the same time across everywhere. So we've got some learning from what's come before. A lot of learning out of sort of Singapore and things around the use of text messaging out to the population, etc. Trying to see and keep people updated on information. Very much working closely across the 4 nations. Obviously, there's a lot that we are given a steer from, so there's sort of frameworks that we have to work within around some of the information that we're provided with. Very much take a steer from Public Health England, WHO, etc. So we're working within those boundaries, but we're trying to share and share what we're doing as much as we can with others as well, and just to say, you know, look, here's our learning, but it's all happening so rapidly. It's quite tricky, and there's so much new stuff. I think the learning from this is going to take quite a long time to really fully understand across all areas. But yeah, we're very open to learning and trying to absorb as much learning from others as possible, to try and build on that rather than trying to recreate multiple times.
And it sounds like you've had an army of volunteers. You know, to what it's all what you've achieved. You know, you've just talked about the singularity of the focus. But it's not, has it been achieved by a sudden influx of cash, or is it a sudden influx of will?
I think it's more will than cash, to be brutally honest. I think there's been and obviously there's been donations, so people have given their time. Suppliers have very much given their time and offered solutions for free, which obviously ordinarily wouldn't be in that position, you know, for a temporary period, etc. So, you know, that's been a huge bonus and enabled us to do this. But I think the majority of it is through will, you know, people just seeing a problem and just saying, right, what can we do? What can we do to help? What can we do to fix it? And also internally, just our prioritization around there is only one, as we say, one show in town. So there's one focus for everyone. It enables you to prioritize other things very, very easily. Or deprioritize other things very easily. So that enables time to be focused on certain things. So in some ways it's a luxury because you've got one thing to worry about, whereas that's not ordinarily the case. We're spread quite thinly. So that it definitely shows the difference when you have one clear objective. It's amazing what you can get done.
And do you have an ask of the community here? Is there any, you know, is there further areas in which you would like support? I can see Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland offering help just now, but I'm sure there's, you know, what would your ask be to the community just now?
I think just to reach out, yeah, if there's either ways that we can work to support you or to develop something together, then I'd be delighted to, you know, pick up conversations and just see where we can take what we've already got. So, you know, if people are seeing things in here that might be of interest, or see something whereby we can collaborate on something, then I'd be absolutely delighted to hear that. I think, you know, the doors have kind of been opened a little bit to different ways of thinking and different approaches, so I'd really welcome that. and we can see what we can do. Yeah, so I just open to having conversations, I think, is the main thing just now.
What would be the best way for people to contact you?
Probably through my email address. I don't know if are you able to share that, Russell? Or yeah, that's probably the best way. I'm available on Twitter as well if that works better for people, but probably my email address is the best way, and then we can pick up from there.
Okay, fantastic. Now, you've achieved an incredible amount in 6 weeks. You know, to what extent can you talk about what the future holds? Is it about consolidating and going more sustainably forward with that, or do you have plans for, you know, what you would like to do next?
So I have lots of plans of what I would like to do. I think the immediate next steps are around that consolidation and just making sure that what we've done is embedded. We're really looking at trying to develop a, you know, sort of buzzword around omni-channel, but really looking to try and open up everything that we can to enable people to access in the way that they need to at that time, which may be different from other times that they want to access our services. So really positioning us as that entry point in to NHS services, either whether that be through our online website, where you could maybe assess your symptoms or do something like that and then engage directly with a service, or whether that be through apps or other automated. I'd like to build on some more automation to try and carry a bit of that weight in the system as well, to try and help people access and link through to services. There's a lot of work we can do around our data and linking up our data better as well. So that's probably the next bit to look at. Now that we've got all the pieces, it's like really making sure that they all work together and that we're understanding how people are moving between different channels as well, and choosing to access services in different ways. So just building on that really, and I think just developing more what we've got just now.
And in terms of you know, you've described well, you know, incredibly dynamic in new behaviours and you know, this execution, but this crisis are times of change for the general population. To what extent is this, are you seeing this as an opportunity towards moving public behaviour towards digital healthcare, contacting you digitally?
Yeah, no, I hate to say it, but it's a massive opportunity from a digital perspective. It's you know, it's terrible circumstances, but it does deliver an opportunity for us to switch, and that's where I like to think that we've been able to do that through our positioning from a government perspective, and being able to position us as a trusted, which we always have been, but sometimes struggle to get that visibility, but as a trusted resource for Scotland, to be able to push that and then be able to, so that people we work with also get that benefit of saying, you know, we're working with us, we're working with them because you're really good in your field, you know, such as our partners that we have at the moment. So it's about recognising that and being able to support both what we're doing through working with new people, but also building on that trust and trying to build that relationship and change that relationship with the public, so that if we are able to do more digital work, the public come with us and they're coming along with us, rather than us trying to force things on people. Actually, it's like, actually, this is a better way that you can engage with us, and we will build this with you, which again goes back to that service design approach, really having the users right up the middle of our developments.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I mean, that feels like an inspiring place to, well, it was a very inspiring talk, so thank you so much. You know, incredible what you've achieved. Thank you for giving of your time.
No problem at all, thank you.